Morning, welcome to the CALS Comm July workshop. And many of you know who I am already, but for those of you who don't, I'm Janine Brumfield and I work for CALS Communication. I manage the 2 college level newsletters and other internal communications and support other PR activities and special projects. And today we're talking about email marketing and newsletters. So rather than hear from one person on the topic, we thought that it would be best to try a panel discussion, which is a first for me leading on Zoom and also a new idea for this kind of workshop style. I do want to say people are still coming in. It's like jack of all trades, which hat? This morning we're going to start by hearing from each panelist, and we're going to answer the questions that some of you submitted through the sign up portal, and you can add any other questions that you may have to the chat. So please, again, add questions to the chat and we'll work through them along with the pre-submitted questions. So now we're turning to the panelists. And panelists, if you would please let us know your name, your title, what department you work for, what email marketing platform you use, and how long you've been using it. Margaret, will you please kick us off?
Yes, good morning, everyone. As Janine said, my name is Margaret Huffman, and I work in the Department of Agricultural and Resource Economics. I've been in the position for about 3 years now. I kind of fell into it with no formal training, and it's definitely a learn as I go experience. I've been using MailChimp in my current position and in my past position at NC State for about 5 years now, in various capacities and different styles. So that's what I have the most experience in.
Michelle?
Hey everybody, I'm Michelle Jewell. I work in the Department of Applied Ecology and I'm science communicator there. I've been doing email marketing since the dark ages of 2008. Started off with MailChimp. I've also used my Emma and do a few Google Mail hacks every once in a while that make it look like it's coming from a MailChimp or an Emma. And yeah, it's like Margaret, I got kind of thrown into it as somebody needs to do this. You're the youngest, so here you go, figure it out. And since then, yeah, I've really learned from my own mistakes and others, and I'm excited to help answer some questions on this panel today.
Thanks, Michelle. Ria?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Ria. Last name is Abear, for those of you who don't know how to pronounce it. I'm the graphic and media designer in the Presage Department of Poultry Science. We use MailChimp, which I inherited when I started this position, so I've been using it in this position for just under 3 years now.
Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Howard. I am the communications specialist in the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences. I have been there for about a year, but I think I'm probably the oldest one on this panel, and we won't go into that, but I've been using email marketing for a while in various capacities. Our department uses MailChimp. I think we use it a little bit differently than some of the others in that we have multiple accounts that we work from. And so I've been using it for a year, but the department has been using it much longer.
I'm not sure you're the oldest, Jennifer, but we can find it out later.
Okay, Brandon?
Good morning, I'm Brandon Hopper. I work with the Department of Cultural Science. I'm a business technology and application technician.
Anyway. Are you sure?
Yeah, it's a tongue twister. And so basically I deal with a lot of the web technologies. I've been doing email marketing for many ages, maybe even 20 years. Anyway, started out with eye contact and have launched.
Eye contact!
Right.
Eye contact!
So started with eye contact, and I've worked with many different platforms and have helped email communications and marketing for various business, And I primarily work with MailChimp today with the Department of Horticultural Science. And anyway, I've run across a lot of different challenges, but hopefully we can share something beneficial today. So I think, see what, I'd like to jump into one question that has been shared. And what are some of those obstacles that have happened or that I've had to manage in setting up an email newsletter? So the first thing is that is to set the expectation, because an email marketing newsletter is really there to, to give a synopsis of several stories. So unless if it's a very targeted message for maybe a special occasion, such as Day of Giving. Anyway, so in doing some of those, we have to figure out, okay, well, in uploading or creating our list, we have to go in, and it's always best to double confirm your subscribers, if at all possible. Because whenever you go in and invite people to your list, you need to really let them know the purpose of that list. And because they forget. And if you're not in constant communication with them, they'll forget what that list was for. So that's one of the many challenges. And so the thing is you really don't want your communications to be flagged as spam, because the best customers are your current customers. I think that's a pretty good synopsis of many of the challenges. There's many other technical things. Each email marketing service, such as MailChimp, iContact, and such, are relatively similar in their offerings, and it's just a matter of really making sure that you have a giving your readers a purpose, a click-through for each one of those messages. So I'm going to stop there because I feel like Margaret may have something in addition to add about her challenges.
Yes, thank you. And I definitely agree there are technical challenges that will occur. I've had issues with my newsletter coming into people's spam folders. I've had, branding can be a challenge. You want to make sure things as, not necessarily complicated, but as specific as the color red that you're using. You want to make sure all of that lines up. But my most persistent and continuous obstacle is finding the right balance of content. Not every department is probably like this, or organization, but our department is, research, academic, and extension. So in my monthly newsletter, I try to make sure that I have 10 articles and a spotlight feature. And that shakes out to be 3 to 4 articles on extension, research, and academic each month. Sometimes I have way more extension, especially right now in time of coronavirus. It seems like a lot of my content is extension focused. And I really have to try hard to overcome that and find more content that's research or academic related. A lot of times that requires me leaning on student spotlights. But even then, you can't do more than maybe 1 a month of those, or even 2, because then it's not even a spotlight if there's, too many. So I would say making sure that each group is represented in their interests so that it doesn't become an extension publication or it doesn't become an academic publication, but it's of interest to everyone in our reading on our list. The other challenge I've been having recently is finding a balance between articles to share and news to share that's specifically about COVID-19 and is about not COVID-19. There is definitely, people are interested. They want to know what we're doing for for COVID-19, and there's a lot of content being generated. But also, I try to be sensitive that that is sometimes, hard to read all about all the time. We see that in the media, we see this on the news, Corona is definitely what we see all the time. So I do want to offer something refreshing that's not Corona as well, but that seems to be overwhelmingly what I have. So, finding the balance between what I'm publishing and making sure everyone's represented and it's content that people want to read is a challenge that I try to consciously address every single month before I send out my newsletter. Janine?
Thanks, Margaret. That was great, both of you. And I'm going to take a swing at the next question, which is, how did you select your email marketing platform? And so we at the college level use both MailChimp and Constant Contact. And I'm having roofing work done in my house. Sorry if you can hear it. This is that whole like CNN on Zoom life. So the great thing about MailChimp is that it allows you to pull an RSS feed. So once you have ongoing newsletter content, it will generate a newsletter for you. I do go in and make changes to the template or whatnot very often, especially for our Inside CALS newsletter. But it's so nice that it pulls that in. I don't have to format it each time, and that it's pulling in content on a weekly basis. And actually you can tell it how often. So if you wanted it to be more often, you could. If you wanted it to be less frequently, you could. But the other piece that we use Constant Contact a lot for other emails, because MailChimp, due to the fact that it has a 2,000 person free account, up to 2,000 contact free account, a lot of people use it, and it ends up in spam folders more often than some of the other email marketing systems and services. So I actually prefer I think that we have better results when we send things out from Constant Contact. But we're trying in the process, hopefully over the next few months, to find something that meets both those needs, that it pulls in RSS feeds, and that maybe it doesn't offer any free options. Constant Contact doesn't offer any free options, and therefore it seems to have better inbox potential. So that's how we've gone about selecting in the past. And I will stay tuned for what we end up selecting in the future. I don't know that we will end up sticking with MailChimp or Constant Contact. If you all have email providers that you love, please send them along. I know Michelle mentioned Emma. That's one of the ones we're looking at. Mailer Lite is something that I'm looking at. Oh, yeah. To Emma, but it's got such a cute logo, and at a conference they gave me such a cute shirt, so it's stuck in my head. Product placement, people. So, and actually, Michelle, you are up next. What kind of email strategy do you use?
Yeah, so I think the key thing for any strategy when it comes to any sort of online content, whether it's going to be a newsletter or social media, is having a strategy that you are constantly reassessing and are ready to adapt and change. I think we've all probably seen with the advent of coronavirus that our audiences have totally changed. And maybe I'm speaking just for myself, or other people have seen this too. There's a lot more craving for an online community. I'm seeing a lot more readership on things that we put out than we, did prior. So being able to adapt and being able to pay attention to what's working in your strategy, I think is really key. I think that's also a reason why a lot of us gravitate towards MailChimp, is it does have a lot of good metric, analytics within it. There's a really good user interface for that you can in real time almost see what's working and what isn't. And then apart from being adaptable, I would also say that being really clear for what the goal is for your email. And something I like to try and do is build up the reputation that if you're getting an email from us, it's not going to be huge, number one. I hate sending huge newsletters. and that there's probably like a very easy call to action in it, whether that's RSVPing for an event or it's just, you know, a bulletin of 3 or 4 stories that have happened recently, stuff that I really want to get in front of people's faces. But I think that's a key one. Back in the days of like 2008, 2009, you know, the long newsletter was where it was at. And I can really start to sense that that's kind of fading away. It's even more of a, you know, if you're trying to promote an event, that's its own newsletter or blast on its own. Then that comes off of what might be your bulletin or your newsletter that you're sending at the end of the month that is a regular schedule. I'm seeing more engagement with splitting things up rather than having that long bulletin.
And Jennifer?
Yeah, I think to add to what Michelle was saying, I think one of our key strategies is understanding the really different audiences that we talk to. And I mentioned that we have multiple MailChimp accounts, and it's to keep it below that 2,000 threshold so that we don't have to pay for them. It does present some challenges in terms of continuity and making sure that whoever's working on them and whoever might work on them in the future has access to them. But we have identified 3 really different audiences that we want to communicate to. And I think understanding why the audience wants to hear from you contributes to a high quality list, like Brandon was saying. And the higher qualified your list is, the higher your open rates and response rates are going to be. And so that's why we've chosen to break out, and we do 3 different lists. And instead of segmenting them on one list, which would push us over that 2,000 thresholds, we chose to do 3 different accounts. So we publish an almost weekly newsletter that basically covers our news stories that are happening from the department. This is our biggest list, and it is our way of reaching our general message out to our stakeholders, our potential donors, a lot of folks in the industry. And then we also do an internal newsletter, and we made this a very conscious effort because prior to my arrival, we were spending a lot of time talking about ourselves and things that the outside world doesn't care as much about, and looking for the application for them. And we have seen our readership go up as we take our internal announcements and make them internally and save truly newsworthy pieces to go to our external audiences. So it's really, I think, important to understand what your subscriber is looking for. And then our 3rd list that we use is specifically for undergraduate recruitment, and it is a drip email campaign that we do. It is small but highly successful, and I can talk about that more later when we talk about recruitment. It is new to us, but it's very different than the way the other 2 operate, which are ongoing.
I look forward to hearing more about that, Jennifer. And would you kick us off with the next question, which is, what are the best times to send emails?
Yeah, I think everybody has different ideas and different magic numbers about this. I think that if we personally just think about our own email inboxes and the schedules and the way people are working these days, I don't want to try to fight with somebody on Monday morning when they're getting back into the swing of things, and I'm not going to try to compete with retail on Thursday afternoon and Friday. Just based on the data that we have, we've had the most success with midweek sends. So we have one that emails on Tuesday and one that emails on Wednesday. I don't see huge differences between either of those 2 days. But as far as time of day, again, I try to balance it and make it mid-morning. And our data shows that most people open it within 2 hours. So I tend to send in the 9 to 11 a.m. range, and we do vary that a little bit. But they generally, if they're going to open it, they usually open it within 2 hours and definitely within 36 hours. Almost no one does like I do and saves up, especially monthly emails to read later when they have time. What I notice is that our open rates, If people have not read it within the 36 hours, they are not going to. And that also helps us know who is most active on our list and who we can cull or who internally might need to pay more attention.
Thanks, Jennifer. That was a very good answer. Michelle, will you take a try?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Jennifer is saying. Monday, never. Friday, forget about it. Thursday afternoon, nope. I don't know if I'm proud of coining this, but I've always talked about the hour, the toilet hour, right? That seems to be when people have their phone, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, right? And that's when you're like, oh, I'll read this. Instead of the shampoo bottle, we have our phones. So I've always tried to stick with that as well. The midweek in the morning, that always seems to be the best. I'll try and get in a little bit earlier. I usually try and send stuff around like 7, 8 o'clock. And exactly as what Jennifer just said, most people read it within the first hour or two. Then you might get a blip here and there in the afternoon. But yeah, midweek morning, that typically seems to be the golden hour.
Okay, on to Margaret. Where do you find fresh content?
I totally depend on my faculty to let me know what they're working on. And I also depend on my leadership in my department to encourage the faculty to let me know what they are working on. I do get some content from CALS, what they put out, and sometimes I hear things and I'm able to get it. But for my monthly newsletter, I'm dependent on faculty saying, hey, this is what I did, this is what I'm working on. Or maybe the student services team, I'm dependent on them to say, hey, we know this student and she's doing something really neat. We want you to interview her. So I'm pretty reliant on other people letting me know what happens. But I do find that if the leadership, and maybe that's the department head or the extension leader or whoever, if they're on board with wanting me to put this material out there, they will encourage faculty to share it with me. A lot of times faculty will email a department head or someone and say, hey, I'm doing this great thing. I want you to know about it. And it's really easy for the department head to just say, thanks for letting me know. I've copied Margaret, who will do a story on it. So definitely have to, keep the encouragement up. And I find that once I, kind of develop a relationship and show interest in what that faculty member is doing, they'll keep me up to date as time goes on. So I kind of try to slowly win them over to my side of keeping me informed. I will say that we have another publication for our graduate students, and it's not an RSS feed, it's more of a bulletin. And from that, I use information from the graduate school. I use information from the Career Center. I subscribe to some professional associations and receive their news, call for papers or conferences. So I think it can depend on who your audience is, where you get the content, what they're interested in, and what's relevant to them. But if you're trying to do something based on news stories, news posts, you really have to really depend on your faculty or your extension professionals or whoever's developing this content to give it to you. And you sometimes have to be pretty persistent.
Thanks, Margaret.
What about to add to that?
Brandon, up to you.
So I'd like to add to that. But first, can we touch base on Marcello's question? Pardon me if I mispronounced that. But something you can do is probably subscribe your Google group email to that newsletter. And so then it's delivering directly to there. And part of the reason why you may want to do that is because that way, you're not forwarding to the Google group, which is fine if it's mainly for functionality and communication. But by subscribing and having those emails directly sent, then it'll avoid some of those technical issues that you might run into in forwarding.
Yeah,
And
Brandon, I just want to say there too, if you subscribe your Google group as a subscriber, say you're using a MailChimp, that's a really easy way to cut down on the number of subscribers you have, right?
yes.
That Google group counts as one subscriber to your MailChimp, even if that Google group is actually sending to 300 people. So
The downside of that, though, is that you're not going to get the analytics from it. Are super important, and if you are trying to maintain your list and keep that relevant, you can't unsubscribe people, and you could potentially have issues there. But my biggest issue was I wouldn't be able to see who's reading and who isn't.
And I 100% agree with that because, pardon me, my internet is kind of going out. So the data is the most valuable thing about email marketing because that's going to help you determine how you segment your list. And so the thing with that is that it also depends on what the purpose of your email newsletter is. You know, for internal, you know, maybe you're tracking interest in how many people are reading extension newsletters versus research versus academic. But as Jennifer was saying, in how they've segmented their list is we have several stakeholders. So cutting down on those internal communications, such as CALS has done, and segmenting those internal ones versus academic, which she mentioned great, is really good for a drip campaign. And so it depends on demographics. Pardon me, I'm trying to get to my tab here about my notes.
Marcella asked also about like the risk of unsubscribe. And so if you are sending to a Google group, when they receive it in their inbox, is that customized at the bottom, or do they each receive one that's to the Google group and then there's a risk of unsubscribing all if you unsubscribe at the bottom?
Yes, there is a risk of that. Yes, very much so. And so then in forwarding that to a Google group, you're losing a lot of that personalization, and some people don't want to receive that. But at the same time, they're subscribed to the Google group for a reason. It's not the best solution, but it is a solution.
We also had a question from Stephanie about if you have contacts that consistently do not open your newsletter, how long before you remove them from the list?
I'd say when I need more room.
Stephanie, at the external newsletter that the college sends out on Thursday morning has close to 13,000 subscribers, but I would say just a little under 50% are dormant. And right now we're going through a process of trying to clean that up. And so I'm working right now on a opt-in or a re-engagement campaign. But the technique that I've been reading about is that you don't necessarily, and I think this is more for a sales organization than the college or a nonprofit organization, for example. It's not necessarily selling something that has a service or they want somebody to engage in, but that it's a little bit over time. So you don't just send one email and hope to re-engage people. You create some sort of month and a half campaign where you are sending them targeted information that potentially so 6,000 people right now, we're trying to determine if they care what we're sending them or how to get them to care or to remove them from our list so that potentially that it frees up space, and also that it also could help our inbox percentages. And so, is a one-off good enough? Should we be trying to segment that list more? There's so many questions. You can just kind of go down into a rabbit hole about it. But overall, I say a lot of our numbers, unlike what Michelle is saying, in the past 4 months for this big list have gone down. And I think it's because there is so much email consumption and people are getting fatigued. So if we can say, hey, do you care about us? And then they're like, yes, I do still care. And then maybe that like gets them back into the habit. Or on the other side, if they don't care, we can remove them and have that space and energy for other stuff. I think we have a few more questions coming up, but I do want to keep the path because we have some good stuff we're getting to. Hannah had asked about open rate, click through, etc., what we aim for. Is anybody able to give a really quick answer to that?
So the thing is that there are some industry averages, but honestly, it comes down to the quality of your content and other factors such as engagement and things like that. And also what the purpose of the newsletter is. So while it is a benchmark, it's definitely not a telltale sign of the health of, well, actually open rate, you want to have that. Pardon me, I'm gonna back up there. Open rate is important, but the thing is that there's no one defined average that is, we're gonna stop.
If I can add to what Brandon was saying, I think I he was heading there, that it varies a lot. And yes, there are standards. Your content is obviously really important, but the quality of your list, I think, is equally important, and how those two things balance how engaged an audience is with your material. Do you have the right audience, and are you providing them the right content? If you have those two things, you're going to have high open rates. And just to give you some specific numbers, I mentioned that we have our 3 different accounts and lists going. I think the industry standard, Brandon, you could nod for the education. I think I've seen 18% as the open rate for that. Our biggest list, which is our weekly newsletter, average around 40% open rate on that. Our monthly internal newsletter is about 50%. And then our drip campaign, and this I think just goes to show you how engaged an audience is and how eager they are for the information, is about 80%. So it's really, really high, but it's a small list. I don't care. They are really interested in what we have to say. So I think it depends a lot of times on the size of your list and how eager that particular audience is for the type of information. And I think that really gets at the idea Brandon mentioned earlier about segmenting and really considering the message you're sending and making sure it's directly targeted, not just to everybody who's ever shown interest in your program or your department, but that has particular interest in this message.
Thank you for vocalizing my thoughts.
So let's hop quick back and we'll get to the question still. Brandon, where do you find fresh content?
Yes, fresh content. So at one point I've created an RSS feed in order to aggregate all my information just to make it easier. But then the thing is that as far as finding fresh content, sometimes I'm looking for something specific. So then I will go to whatever site that I know provides most of that information. I am always requesting information. I have a small group of high touch people that I'm in communication and network with. And so we all stay into communication with each other as far as, what may be coming down the pipeline, or maybe somebody just won a scholarship. And so really having those connections is the best way of doing those things. And making sure during department meetings and updates that, you have to request, you have to ask once in a while. I use social media a lot. That's really the best platform for outside of my department or unit. That's what I find most successful.
And I would say if you find information on any of the other department websites, on Extension, on the college website, on the university website, that is all free game all the time. That's the whole brand message, a lifting tide lifts all ships, or however it goes. And if you're worried that something might not be welcome for you to share, just ask. But my guess is I've always found that people are happy from within the university to have you share their content. So Brandon, will you hit us off with that email segmentation?
Yes, let me go back to that. So email segmentation, once again, it kind of comes down to the content that you're creating, whether if it's, it could be by engagement, it could be newsletter, but really like there's different types of communications that we often use: welcome emails, maybe offering them something. It could be a resource, it could be a survey, or to request information. Most often it's newsletter, or some people need to communicate that we're recruiting for internships or a certain position, which most time is handled through NC State jobs portal, or even connecting with people that have lower open rates. It could be an anniversary of something or a special event. So there's many different ways of segmenting your list. Pardon me, I'm looking at some of the questions here. So those are many of the reasons that you would segment, and as Jennifer said, some try to minimize the number of subscribers in your list, and which is perfectly fine if that is, that there isn't much crossover between your demographics. But by far, I find it much easier to manage a single list and then do my segmentation based on that. Right now, it's primarily by interest, but I hope to further segment into such as what Jennifer is doing and some of our other units and departments is for recruiting. That's what I'm going to look forward to most in setting up drip campaigns, and maybe even, as she said, maybe minimizing internal communications, because we are so overwhelmed at this moment with all the updates.
Thanks, Brandon. Do we lose Ria? Okay, well, if Sharon asked what a drip campaign is.
So a drip campaign is, so you might send out a communication such as, a welcome email, newsletter. And so based on some sort of engagement or action, then there is a series of campaigns that can be, or communications, email communications that can be sent based on that, that action. Or it can be based on time, such as a calendar, an academic or research calendar or whatever. So, so in which case you're really appealing to the needs of that subscriber. And therefore it has a potential of driving up open rates and engagement and really providing much more useful data about your subscribers.
we got Rhea back, so she's going to answer about email segmentation.
Yeah, hi everyone. So, unfortunately, I didn't hear what you were saying, Brandon. My internet kicked me. But what we do is, so one of the things that we do to grow and build our list is it's very hands-on and it's very outside of the email management tool, which is to say that anytime we have an event, anytime that we have face-to-face contacts, like if we have our administrative team is going to visit with especially any kind of upper management, which happens, so we have meetings with the CEO and all these kinds of things of the various companies. One of the things that they've said to us is, we would really love for you to send us updates, let us know what's going on. And so we're like, great, send us a list of all the people. And so we end up with a list from them, which we can then ingest. And so one of the things that we do is we have these very deeply integrated hooks. I really made the case to my department that anytime you're gathering people for anything, an extension thing, an orientation, a meeting, a workshop, then go ahead and get that opt-in. And it's worked wonderfully. It's really gone very well. And what we can then do is when we ingest those pieces, we tag them in MailChimp. And then that helps us create some of our segmentations. And then otherwise, we can make other segmentations, like, are these internal to the university? Are these external? And that can be based either on when they sign up, or periodically I'll go through the list and see what the email on file is. So if that person is subscribing from an NCSU email, then they can be marked internal. One of the nice things about MailChimp is that with the tagging, we can have, somebody can be in multiple segments. And so that's very helpful. So when you're looking at something and saying, oh, we want to target folks who could be donors, maybe we don't want to be targeting as heavily the internal folks on that. We want to be reaching out to those people who are in executive level decision-making situations. And so, but one of the big things I would say for segmentation is that, especially if you have any indication from a target audience that they want to hear from you more, jump on it, follow it up. Do not let that opportunity go away. Ask them to send you a list. Work with their institutional culture. Like if the Tyson CEO says everybody at this level will get this email, well, then guess what? They're going to get it. So, maybe we don't love the top-down approach at all times, but in that particular case, you can use it to your advantage. And I would strongly recommend doing that. That's one of the ways that we've grown our list over 600% in less than 3 years. So, that's a big one. And if they're already there for any reason, anything that you're offering from your department, if they're already there, that means they already have some interest. So keep them interested, get them in that update, get them so that they're seeing what else you have on offer. Because sometimes they're coming back to the same program that they're familiar with. They don't necessarily know what else there is. They don't know they can donate to a specific fund. They don't know that there's another workshop. They don't know, what else might be there. So, expand, the more the more they can know. And don't assume that they know all the things you offer. They may just know the one thing. So give them that thing plus 3, or something.
Thanks, Rhea. Ashley had asked if anyone manages an alumni newsletter, and are there different best practices for those specifically?
Not sure about the other panelists here, but this is actually something that our department is just getting into because of the advent of COVID. And so what we're taking is we have a graduate website, right, for our 2020 spring graduates. And so then that's going to become more like a yearbook. And so that way we can help build our list. And that in itself is going to be an alumni newsletter. But really, when it comes down to it, we have many different campaigns that are going on that request money. And I understand that our alumni are actually the biggest contributors for donating to programs. But we really have to keep in mind how much we're contacting them and engaging them. We should follow standard email marketing practices, try to be in touch with them once a week, feed them content that they would be interested in. So really there isn't terribly much different in my opinion of managing an alumni newsletter compared to any other subscriber list, other than the fact that we really need to keep in mind what, such as what CALS campaigns or university campaigns are going on.
Thanks, Brandon. Michelle, will you tell us a little bit about how you grow your audience lists?
I mean, I'm going to kind of repeat some of the stuff that Rhea and Brandon have said, but anytime that you're riding a serotonin wave after an event, or, after a really successful appeal, that's a time to really capture people's contact information to grow your list. So for example, a really recent example, we're running a seminar series at the moment that's been doing quite well. Of course, we started baking bread, and that was all the rage, 3 months ago, which also feels like the dark ages compared to now. But yeah, so when that kicked off, it was very successful. I started adding within our RSVP emails that here's a link to subscribe to our newsletter as well, if you wanted to keep in touch with events that are going to be happening in the future. And yes, rheumatology, that's the one. And that's always been my method. I try and make collecting people's information as easy as I possibly can, and I try and time it during times when I know people are so super happy with the department or the company or whatever unit you have. If you can capitalize during those serotonin waves, that's a really good way to grow your list. And I think another way, like I talked about before, if you build up a reputation and expectation, like what Brandon was saying, if people have a clear expectation of what they're going to get in their inbox from you and your department, that's a really good way too. And of course, content. If people like your content and they forward it to other people, then people are going to be a part of that list too.
Yeah, and I would add back, I think everything you said, Michelle, is great. And I love the fermentology series. It's great. It's been really fun. I don't like sourdough, but I bake. I've been baking for years. So I was like, oh, fun. And I just ignore the sourdough part.
We're doing vegetables today, so.
I know. I'm like, what? But I would say I definitely agree with you about the, riding the serotonin wave that you say. But I would also add that, but as the event is kicking off or as it's going through, one thing that we found really helpful, like I said, we're having a workshop, and so we collect at that time. Well, we make that as absolutely frictionless as possible. So, when I started, everything was paper. You're signing in, you're standing at a queue at a table, and you're signing in with a piece of paper. No, I said, look, folks, here's an iPad. Here is a spreadsheet. Here are check boxes. That's your name. Check, I'm here. Check, I want your newsletter. And so they're literally there for 5 seconds, and it's pop, pop, they're done. And then I just take that, sort it, export it directly into MailChimp. Gorgeous. I love it. And they love it because they're like, oh, you have a newsletter? And so they're not even aware necessarily that we have it, but it also makes it easier on the people in your department who are already running an event. Because when you ask them to do something to help you, sometimes that can sound like a burden. They're like, oh my God, we're already wrangling 60 things in this event. Make it as touchless as possible. Sometimes we've actually even had graduate students who are assisting, and we'll have them pull up that little sign-in sheet on their phone, and they can actually walk through the queue and have people do, so it's like, it doesn't have to be the way we've always done it. Like, they don't have to queue up, and that's a good thing for them. Sometimes they're meeting their own colleagues and going like, oh, hey, you're here. And, so you get that serendipity. But if they're able to get through that sign-in process very quickly and become aware and subscribe to your newsletter, that's fantastic, because that sets a tone for them for the event as well, which is part of that building that reputation that Michelle's talking about. So it's like you're generating the serotonin buzz that you can then ride later. So it all becomes kind of, if you think about it as all holistically, I think it really, really works very well.
Rhea, what program do you use to collect those?
I'm going to tell y'all how easy this is. Google Sheets. It's just Google Sheets. We have it set up to the department's generic email account so that it doesn't, you know, like if I leave or somebody else leaves from a program, it stays with the department. That information is available. What we do is we get the registration list, we put it in, we break it up depending on the size of the event. So like Turkey Industry Days is a big one. We have like hundreds of people. So one of the things that we did now, again, to make it easy for the people running the event, but also for me to get that nice juicy subscription list, is we split it into 2 iPads. We split it into 2 parts of the sheet. So you have A through K's and L through Z's. And so that's already moving the line faster. But then we just lock down those cells. The only thing that people can do is check a box. They can't, you know, your data is protected. They're not going to end up deleting somebody accidentally. And then we leave some unprotected cells at the bottom for people to write themselves in for on-site registration. And then again, and I mean, we have literally had at times 50% of registrants sign up for the email. I mean, it's been very, very successful, and it's really grown our list. And we know that those are people in our target audience. We know for certain those are the people we're targeting. And then there's obviously we have to target other folks differently, but it's really helpful. And it's just as simple as a Google sheet. It's not anything fancy, because fancy can be intimidating to people when they're having to learn something new. We don't want it hard on the end user. We don't want it hard on our folks as they're running the event.
So, awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Jennifer, I don't want to miss these questions. Tell us about student recruitment marketing.
Yeah, so this is a personal passion project of mine, and we wrote this basically last summer, worked with our director of undergraduate programs to do this. The DRIP campaign, as Brandon was outlining earlier, the difference for me in a DRIP campaign versus some of the others that we do is that it has a very finite time period. You start and you stop on this particular campaign, and it doesn't go any further. We do have a migration email that's the very last one that attempts to move them somewhere else to a different list. But our other email campaigns that we do are ongoing. And so you would hear from us indefinitely, perhaps, but not on the DRIP campaign. So our DRIP campaign is designed for college-minded students who are even vaguely interested in what our department covers. And so we're talking to a 16-year-old audience, roughly. It's very specific in who we're talking to. It is written very personally and specifically to them at that level, at that language, to engage them. It's a highly qualified list that we get that opt in from, as Ria was just saying, used to be recruiting events, obviously not having those this year, but they used to, at any event that they attended where students were coming through, would automatically have them sign up there. We also tag it on any of our departmental stories that are recruitment related, and sometimes even research related. We will tag at the end of the story. We have several different call to actions that we use, and I vary the wording a little bit, but there's almost always one that says, are you a student interested in, and then it might be something relevant to the story, or do you know someone who is? Join our personal email tour. And that's the way that this DRIP campaign was written. Ours is really hefty. It is a 100-day campaign, which is really long. I think we have a total of 14 emails that go out over that 100 days, and they're spaced kind of sporadically. The first few, I think there's 2 that come the first day, then they become daily, then they go to, I think, twice a week for a week, and then they go to weekly. And so there's periodically more and more time that gets filled in to space those out. And I mentioned that we've had really high open rates on this because we have a very targeted list and very specific information. Our attempt with this was to introduce the department because our department has a really personalized undergraduate office. They love to know their students on a first name basis. They're very welcoming. Our students used to hang out in that office. So they had a very personal relationship. This was a theme for the department and a part of their recruiting strategy. So the emails are written as first person letters, mostly from our director of undergraduate programs. So they're signed personally by him. They're talking I and you and everything. So it's very tailored as if you were hearing directly from a person. They're also heavily peppered with links to various things. And the topics cover everything from, hey, meet NC State, here's where we fit in, here's where we as a department fit into CALS, where CALS fits into the university. So there's an introduction in that phase. Then we walk them through our different degree programs and all sorts of various aspects of student life and how they relate to our department. I think the last one talks about study abroad. But there, there's student clubs. Even one of the email is written as a student hack. So it's a current student who's writing this and, just jumps in and says, hey, I'm taking over the email account for a day because I wanted to tell you what it's really like in our department. And so it's this cute take, fresh take on that isn't just coming from administration. But what we found that the response to this has been so positive because they're fairly short. They get longer over the course of time because those who are sticking with the drip are obviously interested in what we have to say. And then the final email, as I mentioned, is a migration. So because this train is going to end at the next stop, we try to move them, if you still aren't sure, if you're still considering it or just want to learn more about us, click this and we'll move you over to our weekly newsletter. So that's how we handle that. But throughout the email series, every one of them has a call to action, and in some cases more than one. It might be, hey, did you want to ask a question? Did this raise any specific questions? Here's my personal email address to our DUP. Have you made a decision? Or, would your family like to come in, make an appointment, spend a day? Now those are all online things, but they can still make that appointment. Hey, if you've made a decision, here's where to find us on the Common App. This is what to click and what to select in the Common App. And then, as I said, the migration at the end. So we're not just sending information. We try to top line it and give them really robust resources to follow through to. There's a lot of graphics involved in it. So we're expecting that because this is a 16-year-old audience, they're going to be viewing it on not on a desktop. And so I develop this as a mobile first email campaign. And so we give them links that they can follow through if they want to explore it. But I've been very excited about it. I don't care if this list never goes above 10 people, because if we recruit 3 students, to me, that's so much more valuable than having 2,000 on a list who never do anything. So that email list, of course, it ebbs and flows with time, because after that 100 days, that really is it, and we don't migrate them unless they request it. That would be a protocol. But we find that most of them have either already followed up with some call to action and communicated with us in a more personal way, set an appointment or something else, or they have migrated themselves. So it's fairly detailed. I'm happy to answer questions offline if anybody's interested in specifics, but that's an overview.
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to take a beat here, and because I know we've reached our end time, but we have a few more questions that I'd like to get through. But this is going to be recorded, so if you have to jump off, you're welcome to. I will say, pitch for next CALS-COMM workshop. Some of you may have been registered already, but the June CALS-COMM workshop was going to talk about communication resources on campus, and that's back on for August. So that will be August 19th at 10 a.m. So I will share that out with the group along with a feedback survey. And thanks for coming in. Brandon, what are your techniques for student recruitment?
So to be honest, I'm going to try a lot of the things that Jennifer just talked about. And I have begun implementing many of those things. But of course, having her wisdom and insight is invaluable to us because in these type of discussions, we all learn something, and such as personalization. So personalization is great, but in the past, it's been by name. But there's ways of communicating and personalizing, as Jennifer said, by using proper nouns and making sure that it is the purpose of that communication is to be more one-on-one type. Um, so and then also implementing more of those drip campaigns that are based on timelines and schedules, and furthermore segmenting because there's so many communications that don't need to go to prospective students that may need to go to internal as opposed to everyone. I've had people unsubscribe because of that. And then of course, ones that are based off of engagement and interest based or events. So those are a lot of things that I plan on trying. And I'm always relearning things such as the call to action. So important. It really is. And a lot of what we're seeing now from our opens is it is primarily mobile, especially now because of COVID. And so, we were talking about past events and participation and getting those names using Google Sheets. But the thing is if we have a purpose to those email communications, we can contact, Zoom host because there's a report of participants and obviously there is a specific objective for each of our Zoom meetings. So then we can send an invite to those participants to say, hey, you want to know more about or receive a weekly update or digest on this, and then provide them more valuable information and get their buy-in.
Thanks, Brandon. And Margaret, what have you learned through your time with email marketing and newsletter creation?
Yeah, and I'll just keep it really simple. The first thing I would recommend anyone do if they're going to start sending a newsletter or take over a new newsletter is ask your department head or ask your leadership, what is the goal of this newsletter? You might be surprised. It might not be just sharing information. It might be to make us look good for our leadership. It might be to educate county extension office workers. Like it might not be what you think. And then you should also know your audience because, I think we've kind of covered this. You don't want to send the wrong content to someone who is thinking they're going to get one thing and then they get another, or they're disappointed and they unsubscribe. So I would just recommend asking whoever is asking you to do the newsletter or whoever is in charge of your department or program, what is the purpose and who should our audience be? And once you know those two answers, you can kind of develop a more strategy to help you do those things.
Thanks, Margaret. What about you, Ria?
I would say, circling back all the way to the beginning and what Brandon was opening with and making that, and following up what Margaret was just saying, is that you want to clearly communicate the goal and purpose of your newsletter or your email campaign or message. And we talked a lot about doing that externally. And I think what Margaret is saying is that we need to have clarity from our leadership, but we also need to give clarity to our department and our groups that we're serving. So if there's a directive that you're working under, whether it be alumni relations, donor relations, recruitment, general information sharing, sometimes you will get people in your department, even external to your department, who are like, this should be in the newsletter, that should be, and there'll be this list, and it'll sort of this be, and also, and it becomes incumbent on us, whoever the us is that's managing these communications, to be very clear about why something should go in, should not go in, should go into a different way. And if you're continually getting that information from people and it doesn't really fit with the goal or purpose of what you're already doing, then that's giving you data as well to say, maybe we need to do something a little different. Maybe we need to have, like Jennifer is saying, a totally separate list, not a segment of a list, but a whole different sort of ball game to play in, because we're getting, there's clearly a want to share something. And then if you start sharing that, you want to do that in a way that is strategic and that's going to be effective. And so that you can say, yes, that does make sense. So one of the things that we've been doing in poultry science is kind of cross-pollinating. So in your extension portals, you can subscribe to those, and those aren't really a newsletter so much as it's just an RSS feed. So like on Wednesdays, if there's new content to the portal, if you are subscribed, will get an update. We've been really cross-pollinating that with our newsletter to say, hey, this is an extension story. Do you want more extension? Go over here and subscribe here. And again, that kind of helps your end user understand, this is what I'm getting. So you're, again, like Margaret is saying, they're getting what they're expecting. But it also helps internally when somebody says, oh, this should be in the newsletter. And it's like, well, our department newsletter is really kind of focused on A, but maybe that has a place over here in B, or we need to launch a B because there's some need or desire out there. And that also will let you set up some A/B testing and some understanding of where things are really going to work. So, that's one of the things that I've learned, is that it has to be, all the communication has to be two-way. You and your audience with you, internally with you, you internally, across departments, across the college, so but having to manage internal expectations is a challenge. It's something that I've been learning and adapting to as I've gone through in this role, because there are times when people are like, well, that should be in the newsletter, and I'm like, that's a one-line announcement. So one of the things we've done is we added an announcement section to our newsletter. It's not just aggregating our stories, but it's an announcements. And those get a lot of clicks. So that was clearly something that resonated for our audiences, because they were like, oh, sometimes, they do read the stories, we get good clicks on that, but especially the announcements, they can be very brief. There's not really a story behind it. It's maybe a resource or something. But those obviously attract eyeballs and interest. So, kind of think about, be adaptable in what the format even of your emails might look like. And ours has definitely shifted over the last almost 3 years.
And speaking about being adaptable, Jennifer, what are you hoping to try in the future?
Yeah, I think I really liked what Rio was just saying about that, in listening to, you're trying to balance and understand what your readership is looking for versus what we want to say. And that is a push-pull back and forth and trying to find that balance. But what I'm looking forward to in the future is working on our external semi-weekly newsletter, sort of weekly, and adding some different things to that, because right now it's pretty tactical and it is just an RSS feed, which I have a love-hate with, because it automatically goes, but at the same time, it's pretty utilitarian looking. I think we could do better just design-wise on that, but I also think we could do better content-wise. I will say that one thing that we've discovered is that people don't go terribly deep. I think Michelle mentioned this at the outset. They don't go terribly deep in newsletters. And so we find that by sending more frequently with a little bit less content, we have people are more likely to scan and to read. And that's what we try to do in the newsletters that we send out. So something I'd like to try in the future is what Ria was saying, is formatting it a little differently to add some sections to it that would be, quick headlines or, brief news bites that people could consume faster.
I strongly recommend that. It really paid dividends in ours, and sometimes that is also a management of internal, because, I'm sure everybody on the panel has had this from at least one person in their department where they're like, this goes in the newsletter. And you're like, that is 4 words. That is not a story, that's not even a sentence. So that becomes an opportunity or a challenge, depends on how you like to look at it, to make that into a full sentence and kind of figure out what it is. Like, you know, I had somebody who was like, oh, we were just published in Science. And I'm like, okay, that's not a story yet. But so that went out as an announcement in our last newsletter, but then I followed up with an in-depth story with a student who was graduating, who this is novel research. This is possibly going to change things in both animal and human health. And so that'll go out in our next newsletter, the kind of follow-up story. And another thing I would say is hook stories together. I really love what Jennifer was talking about with the calls to action, which mea culpa, I have not been great on in the last few months in the stories themselves, but I always want to reference back to a story. And I do this on extension side, I do this on the department side. So, hey, last week we talked about this and here's kind of a follow-up. Sometimes I do things as series. So like if we're leading up to a big event, we'll say like, here's sort of a story about the planning of that event, here's a story about the event, and here's sort of a fall, you know, something like that. So, but you can kind of connect these things, and that way people are not just seeing content and it's like it's new, it's fresh, that's good, but they're seeing also the continuity, and they're seeing that reputation of your researchers, your students, your staff, whatever it is that you're showing. And that goes back to something that Michelle was talking about, is that reputation building, so that, yeah, the content is new, that's great, it needs to be that way, but it needs to, you know, continually show that relevance for your audience. You know, because we had a story, high click story about one of our researchers. So anytime that I'm going to talk about his lab, I'm going to reference back to these other stories so that people can say, oh, I see where this whole research project is going. You know, and so it's a spotlight, but it's a spotlight that's tracking across the stage. And that's really, really been beneficial for us.
Yeah, and actually that what you said just made me think of something, that if you do one of those announcements that, hey, we were just published in X magazine, if you've done a story on it, that's a great way to refer back to people. Hey, did you miss it? You know, this has gotten some national traction here. If you missed it, here's the link back. So yeah, I love that idea of making the connections.
Yes, and I think it's good practice for us. Michelle was mentioning, you know, part of her job title and role is science communicator. I've been doing some graduate classes here at NC State in science communication. That also gives us the opportunity to deepen our knowledge internally with our folks, is that, yes, we can link to the science story, but if we read it, interview our person, and understand it and digest it, we are now able, in those ad hoc times across campus when that happens, or at a conference that we're attending, we can now give the elevator pitch for that research lab, for that research project, for that recruitment event. And then we ourselves are kind of moving that message through as well. We're not just saying like, oh yeah, go read my newsletter, I don't know anything about poultry science. When I started, I knew zero about poultry science, zero. So now I have to know a whole lot, and I can do the elevator pitch, and that's part of it too. And it gives you content for your newsletter, it gives you content for larger stories, and it also gives you, I think, that confidence to be able to represent the department in multiple ways outside of the newsletter, which I think is super important. Because if we can communicate enthusiasm, that's important. If we're just like, yeah, go read our newsletter, eventually people are going to be like, I don't think that person knows what's going on, you know, and that's not good.
So we're going to end with Stephanie Watts's question. Stephanie's asking, is it better to start the story on the newsletter monthly and then direct them to an article on the county's website, or should the whole article be on the newsletter? And I'm going to say, direct them to your website. Can I get an affirmative? So
yes.
you want,
yes,
you want
I would
them
say
to
do
fall,
both.
you want them to fall, you want them to fall down the hole of your website. You want them
Yes.
to come and see that your website is an incredible resource and they just want more of it.
Yes.
And then you can send them another newsletter next week and do the same.
Yes.
And so that just reiterates. Also,
Yes.
your social media, that's a different
Yes.
topic for a different day. But thanks everybody for joining in. And now you know a few of our new other faces relating to email marketing in the college, and reach out if you have questions. I know I'm going to follow up with Jennifer because I want to know more about this drip campaign. The college isn't doing anything like that. That's pretty special. So thanks so much to everybody for joining in. And again, hope to see you on August 19th at 10 a.m. Same place, different time. No. Have a great day.